It's a funny thing, criticism. Especially in a relationship. They tell you communication is key, that you should be honest about your needs. But what they don't tell you is that there's a secret translation guide that only men seem to have. A guide where "I would love it if you were a little more romantic" gets translated into "everything you are is wrong, and I find you fundamentally disappointing." I didn't have that guide. I just had my feelings, and I was naive enough to think that sharing them was the right thing to do. Now I'm sitting in an apartment that's half the size of my old one, listening to the couple next door laugh through the thin walls, and everyone, literally everyone, says this is the life I chose. That this is my fault. My name is Chloe. I'm 32 now, but this all started when I was 30, on the cusp of what was supposed to be the rest of my life. I was with Mark. And Mark, on paper, was perfect. You know the type. He was an architect, smart, successful, and stable in a way that felt like bedrock. He wasn't wildly handsome in a movie star way, but he was pleasant to look at, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that I initially mistook for strength. Our life was orderly. Predictable. We had a beautiful apartment with minimalist furniture that he designed himself. We had a joint savings account. We had dinner with his parents on the first Sunday of every month. It was also adult. So secure. And for a while, that security felt like the warmest, safest blanket in the world. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought we had it all figured out. I had a partner who was reliable, who would never cheat, who would always make sure the bills were paid. He was a good man. But a good man isn't always a good partner. That's the distinction nobody ever prepares you for. The problem, the tiny crack in the foundation that eventually brought the whole house down, was the complete and utter lack of romance. It wasn't just a lack of grand gestures, it was a lack of small ones too. Mark's love language was practicality. It was him changing the oil in my car without me asking, or assembling a flat-pack bookcase in under an hour, or making sure our retirement funds were properly diversified. And I appreciated those things, I really did. But they didn't make my heart flutter. They didn't make me feel desired or cherished. They made me feel managed. Like I was a well-run project. Our dates became routine, settling into the same 3 restaurants. Compliments were rare and usually about something I'd accomplished, like getting a promotion, not about me as a woman. I started to feel less like a girlfriend and more like a business partner in the enterprise of our shared life. And a deep, gnawing loneliness began to settle in my bones, even when he was sitting right next to me on the sofa. The breaking point, or at least the first real tremor, happened on our 3rd anniversary. I'd been dreaming about it for weeks, imagining what he might do. Maybe a surprise weekend trip to the coast. Maybe that delicate necklace I'd pointed out in a shop window a month before. I spent the whole day in a state of giddy anticipation. I got home from work, and he was already there, smiling. There was a large, awkwardly shaped box wrapped in plain brown paper on the kitchen table. My heart did a little leap. Something big. Something unexpected. He told me to open it. I tore away the paper, and inside was a vacuum cleaner. A top-of-the-line, bagless, cyclonic, silver and purple vacuum cleaner. He stood there, beaming, and told me he got it because he knew I hated our old one, and this one had amazing reviews for pet hair. We didn't even have a pet. I know what you're thinking. Ungrateful. Spoiled. But you have to understand, it was never about the gift itself. It was about the message. A vacuum cleaner doesn't say, "I can't imagine my life without you." It says, "I've noticed the state of our floors and have provided a solution." I tried to hide my disappointment. I really did. I forced a smile and said thank you. But later that night, after a perfectly pleasant but entirely unspecial anniversary dinner at our usual spot, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I tried to be gentle. I told him I appreciated the thought behind the vacuum, the practicality of it, but that for an anniversary, I was hoping for something more romantic. Something that was for us, not for the apartment. I explained that I felt our relationship was losing its spark and that I missed the feeling of being courted, of being desired. His reaction was not what I expected. He didn't apologize or try to understand. He got defensive. He looked at me with this wounded, confused expression and asked what was wrong with the gift. He said he had spent a lot of time researching it to get the best one. He said he wasn't a mind reader and that if I wanted a specific necklace, I should have just said so. Then came the line that I would hear in my head for months afterward. He said that all that romantic stuff was corny, that it was for movies, and that real love was about showing up every day and being dependable, which is what he did. He felt criticized. Not just his gift, but his entire way of being. In his mind, I had taken his best effort, his most practical expression of care, and thrown it back in his face. I tried to explain that it wasn't a competition between practicality and romance, that a relationship needed both, but he wasn't listening. He just shut down. He turned over and went to sleep, leaving me staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than ever. After that night, I decided I needed a new strategy. Clearly, direct communication had backfired spectacularly. So, I would be subtle. I would guide him. I thought of it as a teaching opportunity. I was going to teach my perfectly practical boyfriend how to be romantic. I started leaving clues, like a gentle trail of breadcrumbs leading to the man I needed him to be. I'd leave my laptop open to a travel blog about romantic getaways in wine country. When we watched a movie and a character did something sweet, I'd sigh and say something like, "Wow, that's so lovely, isn't it?" I'd talk about my friend Jessica, whose boyfriend had filled their apartment with flowers just because it was a Tuesday. I thought I was being clever and non-confrontational. I was giving him ideas, planting seeds. I was playing the cool girl, the one who doesn't nag, the one who just gently inspires her man to be better. I genuinely believed it was for his own good, for our good. I was trying to save us. But Mark didn't pick up the breadcrumbs. He walked right over them. Instead of being inspired, he just retreated. It was like a switch had been flipped. The already low level of effort dropped to absolute zero. Before, he would at least offer to cook dinner or suggest a movie. Now, there was nothing. He came home from work, ate whatever I put in front of him in near silence, and then disappeared into his office to work on his blueprints until bedtime. The practical gestures stopped, too. The car oil went unchanged. A leaky faucet dripped for weeks until I finally called a plumber myself. He was physically present, but emotionally, he had checked out entirely. He had built a wall around himself, and I was on the outside, frantically trying to find a way in. And here's where my own blindness, my own stubborn narrative, took over. I didn't see his withdrawal as a reaction of a man who felt defeated and inadequate. I saw it as a punishment. A petty, passive-aggressive tantrum. I thought he was intentionally withholding affection to get back at me for the vacuum cleaner incident. My internal monologue became a raging torrent of self-righteous anger. How dare he? I'd think to myself. How incredibly childish to stop trying altogether just because I made one small request. I'd vent to Jessica on the phone for hours, detailing every slight, every moment of silence. She, being the loyal friend she was, validated every single feeling. She told me he was being manipulative. She said he was emotionally immature. And I soaked it all up because it confirmed what I already believed, that I was the reasonable one, the one fighting for the relationship, and he was the broken one who refused to be fixed. His silence wasn't a sign of his pain, it was proof of his deficiency. This became our new normal. Months passed in this cold war of silence and resentment. We were two strangers sharing a mortgage. The apartment, once a symbol of our stable future, started to feel like a beautiful, minimalist prison. We'd have people over for dinner and we'd put on a show. We'd laugh, we'd hold hands, we'd play the part of the happy, successful couple. But the second the door closed on the last guest, the masks would drop and the suffocating silence would descend again. I felt like I was going insane. I would lie awake at night next to his sleeping form, a man who was inches away but might as well have been on another continent, and I would just replay everything. I'd list my grievances like a prayer. I remembered how I supported him through his licensing exams, how I networked for him at my company's events to get him new clients, how I managed our entire social calendar. I had been a good partner. All I had asked for in return was a little poetry, a little passion. Was that really so much to ask? I convinced myself that I was a martyr, bravely enduring this emotional drought while waiting for him to come to his senses. Our friends started to notice. Not just the big things, but the little shifts in energy. At a barbecue one day, a mutual friend, Liam, pulled me aside. He was one of Mark's oldest friends, a decent guy. He asked if everything was okay between us. He said Mark seemed really down lately, quieter than usual. Then he said something that I should have listened to, but didn't. He said, very gently, that maybe Mark felt like he was in a no-win situation. That maybe he felt like anything he did would be wrong, so he had decided to do nothing. I was furious. I saw it as Liam taking Mark's side. I told him he didn't understand. I said that Mark was the one who was refusing to communicate, refusing to try. I painted a picture of myself as the long-suffering girlfriend just trying to get a sliver of affection from a stone wall. Liam backed off, but the conversation stuck with me, not as a moment of potential insight, but as another betrayal. Now even our friends were conspiring to misunderstand me. The final, explosive end came on a Tuesday night. It was just like any other night for the past 6 months. We ate dinner in silence, the only sounds the clinking of our forks against the plates. He finished first, stood up, and started to take his plate to the kitchen. And something inside me just snapped. I couldn't take one more second of the quiet, of the void between us. All the frustration, the loneliness, the righteous anger I had been nursing for months just boiled over. I slammed my fork down and screamed, "What is your problem?" He froze, his back to me. I stood up and just let it all out. I asked him why he was treating me like a ghost in my own home. I accused him of punishing me, of intentionally hurting me. I cried that if he didn't love me anymore, he should just have the decency to say it. It was a torrent of accusations, half-truths, and genuine pain. He turned around slowly, and for the first time in a long time, I saw an emotion on his face other than tired indifference. It was pure, unadulterated exhaustion. He wasn't angry. He was defeated. He leaned against the counter and finally told me his side. He said, in a low, flat voice, that he had stopped trying. He admitted it. But he said it wasn't to punish me. He said that when I was disappointed by the vacuum cleaner, it was about more than just the gift. He said he heard me telling him that his entire way of loving me was wrong. All the things he thought he was doing right, being stable, providing, being a reliable partner, he felt I had dismissed as worthless because they weren't wrapped in a romantic bow. He told me he'd spent weeks after that fight trying to think of romantic things to do, but his mind went blank. Everything felt forced and fake, like a role he didn't know how to play. He said he realized he could never be that guy from the movies I seemed to want. And the fear of trying and failing again, of seeing that look of disappointment on my face one more time, was so overwhelming that it was easier to do nothing at all. He said he stopped trying because he felt he had already failed. He was tired of feeling like a constant disappointment. That confession was the end. Hearing him say that he had made a conscious choice to give up was, to me, the ultimate betrayal. My brain twisted his words, filtering them through my own narrative of being wronged. He wasn't a man paralyzed by fear of failure. He was a man who wouldn't even try for me. The nuance was lost on me. All I heard was, "I chose not to make an effort for you." The sadness and exhaustion in his voice didn't register as genuine pain. It registered as an excuse. I looked at him leaning against the counter in our perfect kitchen, and I felt nothing but cold, hard fury. I told him if he wasn't willing to try, then there was nothing left to talk about. I told him to leave. I expected him to argue, to fight for us, to finally show some passion, even if it was angry passion. But he didn't. He just nodded, as if he'd been expecting it. He walked into the bedroom, packed a single bag, and left. He closed the door so quietly behind him, and the finality of that soft click echoed in the silent apartment louder than any of my shouting had. The immediate aftermath was a hollow, echoing mess. For the first few days, I operated on a strange cocktail of adrenaline and vindication. I told Jessica he had admitted it, he had given up on us. I was right all along. But as the days turned into a week, the vindication curdled into a deep, terrifying despair. The silence in the apartment was no longer his fault, it was just mine. I had to go through the motions of separating our lives. Calling the bank, changing the utilities, dividing our furniture. Every task was a painful reminder of the future we were supposed to have built together. The pain was sharp and constant. I had gotten what I wanted, he was gone, but I had lost everything in the process. I had burned the house down just to prove it had a faulty foundation. It took less than 3 months for the next blow to land. Liam called me, a courtesy call, he said. He wanted me to hear it from him before I saw it somewhere else. Mark was dating someone. A woman named Anna from his rock-climbing gym. My heart sank into my stomach. 3 months. It had taken him only 3 months to replace me, to move on from our 5 years together. I immediately went online, of course. I found her profile. And she was everything I wasn't. She had pictures of herself on top of mountains, covered in dirt and smiling. She wore practical hiking boots, not designer heels. She was the kind of woman who would probably think a new carabiner was the peak of romance. She looked easy, uncomplicated. Soon, the pictures of them together started to appear. Them on a camping trip, smiling in front of a tent. Them laughing in a canoe. And in every single picture, Mark looked different. He looked lighter, happier, and more relaxed than I had ever seen him. The perpetual tension he carried in his shoulders when he was with me was gone. He was smiling with his whole face. Seeing that smile felt like a physical punch. He wasn't the emotionally stunted, incapable man I had made him out to be. He was just incapable of being what I wanted. He was perfectly capable of being happy, just not with me. He found someone who didn't need grand gestures, someone whose love language was also based on shared activities and quiet companionship. He hadn't changed. He had just found someone who accepted his native tongue. The final piece of my support system crumbled shortly after that. I was on the phone with Jessica, complaining about Mark and his new, perfect, mountain-climbing girlfriend when she stopped me. She sighed and said, "Chloe, you know I love you, but maybe Liam was right. Maybe you pushed him away." I was stunned into silence. This was my best friend, my ride or die, the person who had been in my corner this whole time. She went on to say that hearing me talk about it over and over was becoming too negative and that maybe I needed to look at my own role in what happened. That was it. The knife didn't just twist, it broke off in the wound. In the space of a few months, I had lost my partner, my home, and now my best friend. Everyone was siding with him. Everyone was rewriting the history of our relationship to make me the villain. I was utterly and completely alone. So that's where I am now. In this small apartment that I can barely afford, listening to other people live their happy lives through the walls. I spent a lot of time replaying the tapes, trying to find the exact moment it all went wrong. And I still don't think I was wrong to ask for what I needed. I wasn't. A relationship needs affection and romance to survive. It can't run on diversified stock portfolios and efficient appliances alone. But what I've learned is that you can't make someone into something they're not. You can't teach a man to write you poetry if he only knows how to write you a check. The lesson, I guess, is a bitter one. Men don't want feedback, they want unconditional acceptance. They don't hear a request for more romance as an invitation to grow together. They hear it as a final judgment on their character. They hear you are not enough, and maybe some men rise to that challenge, but most, like Mark, will just quit the game entirely. They'll find an easier game to play, with a teammate who doesn't care about the score, just that they're on the field together. You can have the stable, reliable provider, or you can have the passionate, romantic lover, but the world seems to be telling me you can't have both in the same person. And if you dare to ask for both, you end up with neither. I might have made mistakes in how I said things. My approach was clumsy, my frustration was too obvious. But I will stand by the fact that what I was asking for wasn't unreasonable. I wanted to feel loved in a way that I could understand. He wasn't willing to learn, and I wasn't willing to settle. It's a tragedy, really. But the rest of the world doesn't see it that way. They see him, happy and thriving with his new girlfriend. And they see me, alone and bitter. And in their simple math, that makes it all my fault. They think I broke a perfectly good man out of sheer pickiness. But they weren't there for the years of quiet desperation, for the anniversary gift that made me feel like a housekeeper. They don't know what it's like to starve for affection while sitting at a full table. They don't know. But I do. And I guess that will have to be enough.